Assalamu alaikum, children. How are you all? Hope you all are safe and healthy at your home. So, children, today we are going to start about a new concept in your third lesson, animals and their food. Let's continue our discussion. So, children, here you are seeing food chain and food web. Now, we try to understand about food chain and food web. If you come to food chain, living organisms need food to perform their life processes. Some organisms can produce their own food, while some depends on other organisms to obtain their energy. We can therefore identify different feeding types based on how the organism get its food. They are producers and consumers. Mm. Before entering into the food chain, let us understand about the food web also. What is the difference between a food chain and food web? Food web. Food chains cannot always be represented by a straight line. They can be branched with several food chains connected to each other to form a web. This web like system of interconnected food chains is called a food web. Here you can see the difference between a food chain and food web. You can see a branched like structure in food web, whereas in food chain we are seeing a simple chain. Now let us see about food chain. Here we are having producers, consumers, and decomposers also. First, we understand about producers. What are producers? Producers make their own food. Plants are called as producers. Why we are calling plants as producers? Let's see. Any living thing that uses the energy of the sun to make its own food is a producer. So, what is a producer? Any living thing that uses the energy of the sun to make its own food is called as a producer. A consumer is an organism that eats living plants or animals. All animals are consumers because they do not make their own food. What will happen if all animals ate plants? To maintain a balance in nature, animals follow their food habits. Basing on their food habits, there are different types of consumers. We classify them into specific groups such as primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. Now, let's see about primary consumers. Primary consumers. Primary consumers are herbivores that eat producers. Here you have given definition. They eat producers. They include herbivores such as some insects, rabbit, cow, squirrel, grasshopper, butterfly, fish, seahorse, zebra, rat. Here you have given some of the examples of primary consumers. Now let us see about secondary consumers. Secondary consumers, they eat primary consumers, or an animal that feeds on primary consumer is called a secondary consumer. They include carnivores such as many birds, frog, fox, like that. Here you have given a secondary consumer as fox, and which is eating a primary consumer rabbit to better understand. So let's see about tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers are animals that eat both primary and secondary consumers. These animals are usually the top animal in the food chain. Now tertiary consumers eat secondary consumers. They include carnivores that feed on other carnivores. They include snakes, lions, etc. In a forest, The deer eats grass, and in turn, we know the tiger eats deer. In any ecosystem, there is a chain like relationship between the organisms that live there. The sequence of who eats whom is called a food chain. Again, we are seeing about food chain. It describes how organisms get energy and nutrients by eating other organisms. Now, the food chain describes how organism gets energy and nutrients by eating other organisms. A food chain shows the relationship between the producers and consumers. Food chain explains the interdependence of diverse organisms in nature. Let us see about decomposers. Bacteria and fungi, such as mushrooms, get energy by the breakdown of dead plants and animals. They are called as decomposers. They break complex substances into simple substances that goes into the soil and used by plants. Thus, they help in cycling of materials between producers, consumers, and soil. So, they are also called as recyclers. So, decomposers are also called as recyclers. If you see animal colonies and food, there are many animals that live in colonies from huge elephants to tiny ants. Let us understand about some social animals. What are social animals? For example, we see ant as a social animal. Ants do a lot of things. We can see the wonder world of ants. Their colony has large ant forces to do work. There are mainly workers, soldiers, female ants and male ants. The workers collect and maintain food stock for others in the colony along with several other duties. Just as we keep cows for milk, ants keep a type of insect called as aphids or honeydew. So what are these insects called? Honeydew or aphids. Like us, ants are good farmers as well. They cut leaves into pieces and create a bed to grow a type of fungus which they eat. So, this is about social animals. For example, we have seen here ants. Let us um, stop our discussion here and we continue in our live class. If you have any doubt up to this, you can ask in your live class. Children, up to this, and Allah Hafiz.